We're about to challenge a 2,000-year-old myth. Seriously, we're throwing out the Hollywood fiction, the dramatic Shakespeare plays, and those ancient, highly calculated smear campaigns. Welcome to our explainer on one of the most fundamentally misunderstood figures in all of human history, Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. Today, we're going right back to the original historical sources to completely dismantle the propaganda that's clouded her legacy and finally reveal the true, absolute political mastermind beneath it all. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this comparison. On the left, we have the myth. For centuries, the world has basically reduced Cleopatra to a mere symbol of beauty, extravagance, and, seduction. The overarching narrative, the one most of us are taught in school, is that she just kind of charmed her way through history, using romance to manipulate powerful men. But when you actually strip away the sensationalism and look at the real historical sources, the reality on the right is far more extraordinary. She wasn't just a romantic figurehead who happened to sit on a throne. No way. She was a supreme political genius, a literal master strategist operating with incredible precision in what was, frankly, one of the absolute most volatile, cutthroat periods of the ancient world.
Now, to really grasp the sheer intellectual horsepower of her brilliance, just consider this number, 9. And no, this isn't the number of grand palaces she owned or territories she conquered or wars she fought. This massive number represents her linguistic genius. Cleopatra fluently spoke 9 different languages. Think about that. In an era where communication across borders was incredibly difficult and rulers relied heavily on translators who could, let's be honest, easily manipulate the message, she held the power to speak directly to foreign dignitaries, allied kings, and her own incredibly diverse populace.
Her fluency included Egyptian, Greek, Latin, and Ethiopian, among others. But here is the truly staggering historical fact. So Cleopatra was born into the royal Ptolemaic family, right? This was a Greek dynasty that had ruled Egypt ever since the death of Alexander the Great. For 3 entire centuries, her predecessors sat in Alexandria and ruled over the Egyptian people without ever bothering to learn their native tongue. They relied entirely on a massive bureaucracy to translate their decrees. But Cleopatra, she was the very first ruler in her entire 300-year dynasty to actually learn the Egyptian language. And actually, scratch that, it wasn't just a nice gesture. That is calculated, brilliant political strategy. She understood that to truly command loyalty, to integrate herself with the powerful Egyptian priesthood, and to totally outmaneuver her rivals, she had to communicate with her people directly. She wasn't just ruling them, she was speaking to their hearts in their own words.
And she absolutely needed every single ounce of that strategic brilliance from day one. Let's trace her incredibly brutal introduction to politics. Born in 69 BC, she didn't exactly grow up in a peaceful, serene palace. She was totally immersed in a toxic environment of power struggles, endless betrayal, and outright assassination. The Ptolemaic court was practically famous for family members poisoning one another. By the time she was just 18 years old, she's already co-ruling the extraordinarily wealthy nation of Egypt alongside her father. And by 21, she is locked in a bitter, existential, armed fight against her own brother for the throne. So long before Julius Caesar ever even set foot in Egypt in 48 BC, Cleopatra was already a battle-tested survivor. She already knew exactly how to navigate a deadly, unforgiving political landscape. Which brings us right to the year 48 BC, and one of history's most famous and yet most heavily misunderstood encounters. Julius Caesar, the undisputed most powerful man in Rome, arrives in Alexandria. Now, at this point, Cleopatra is effectively locked out of power and blockaded by her brother's superior military forces. If she's discovered, she's going to be killed. So how on earth does she get to Caesar to plead her geopolitical case? Well, she uses a legendary maneuver we're calling the carpet strategy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark difference between the myth and the reality of Cleopatra. Look, we've all heard the legendary story of her being rolled up in a rug to, seduce a Roman general. But look at these steps as the calculated, high-stakes maneuver it actually was. Step 1, she has herself smuggled inside a rolled carpet or bed sack, completely evading the heavily guarded harbor. Step 2, she is delivered directly past enemy lines straight into the private quarters of Julius Caesar. It was an act of absolute audacity and incredible physical danger. But step 3 is the real payoff. She didn't win Caesar's backing simply because she rolled out of a rug looking beautiful. The contemporary sources tell us that Caesar was captivated by her sharp intelligence, her profound wit, and her deep political mind. She negotiated. She reframed her entire geopolitical situation, leveraging Egypt's vast wealth, and secured a military alliance that literally changed the course of world history.
That alliance made them an unstoppable geopolitical force, effectively uniting the wealth of Egypt with the heavy military might of Rome. But, as we know, the ancient world moved fast, and fortunes turned on a dime. Just 4 years later, in 44 BC, Julius Caesar is assassinated in Rome. So does Cleopatra's power just crumble? Not at all. She immediately pivots. She analyzes the huge power vacuum in Rome and masterfully aligns herself with Mark Antony, Rome's next ascendant military leader. Together, they harness their sheer political momentum and begin building this massive, sprawling empire. They push the boundaries of their shared influence from Egypt all the way to the far reaches of the Middle East. She wasn't just surviving the chaos of the ancient world, she was actively expanding her power on a truly global scale.
But as her power, her wealth, and her influence grew, well, so did the massive target on her back. And her greatest enemy wasn't going to face her on a traditional battlefield. No. The greatest threat to Cleopatra's reign and ultimately to her entire legacy was brewing right in the heart of Rome itself. It was the Roman propaganda war.
Enter Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. He wanted absolute dictatorial power over the entire Roman world, which fundamentally meant he had to take down his rival Mark Antony, and by extension, Cleopatra. But he had a major political problem. You can't just attack an incredibly powerful, deeply successful neighboring queen who's been a loyal ally to Rome without a really solid pretext. Plus, starting another civil war against a fellow Roman like Antony, incredibly unpopular. So Octavian engineered a brilliant, ruthless, and entirely unprecedented smear campaign. He labeled Cleopatra a dangerous foreign temptress. He painted this master linguist, this brilliant naval commander and political genius as a corrupting, almost mystical force who had magically ensnared Rome's greatest generals with her exotic wiles. And why did this specific lie work so perfectly? Because to the deeply patriarchal, traditionalist Roman society, the idea of a foreign woman defeating them intellectually and politically was just completely unthinkable. Weaponizing her identity as a seductive, manipulative outsider was really the only way Octavian could justify a devastating war against her without ever having to admit she was a true, highly capable geopolitical rival.
So the crucial point here is how easily reality can be overwritten by the victors. Octavian's spin, this whole seductive foreign threat narrative, was entirely fabricated to mask the actual truth. The real threat was that she was a brilliant, incredibly powerful woman who simply inspired profound fear in the hearts of Roman men. Octavian couldn't exactly go to the Roman Senate and declare, "Hey, I'm going to war because the Queen of Egypt is vastly wealthier, smarter, and more politically capable than I am." Right? He had to systematically tear down her character. It's fascinating when you think about it. This ancient smear campaign mimics modern media spin almost perfectly. It was a targeted character assassination designed to evoke outrage and fear, and it was so incredibly effective that it became the definitive, accepted historical record for the next 2,000 years.
Ultimately, Octavian's relentless campaign, waged aggressively on both the political and military fronts, finally cornered them. In 31 BC, Octavian's naval forces defeat Antony and Cleopatra at the massive Battle of Actium. Just a year later, as Octavian's troops close in on Alexandria, on August 12, 30 BC, Cleopatra tragically dies. Ancient sources indicate it was likely by the bite of an asp, which is a cobra highly sacred to Egyptian royalty, though, to be fair, the exact method remains debated. But what is absolutely certain is that she and Antony both chose to end their own lives on their own terms, rather than face the ultimate humiliation of being paraded in chains through the streets of Rome as trophies in Octavian's triumph. With her death, the ancient world fundamentally fractured. 300 years of Ptolemaic rule ended practically overnight, and the fiercely independent, mighty nation of Egypt, a civilization spanning millennia, was absorbed as just another province to feed the Roman Empire. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of our entire explainer. Let this sink in. Cleopatra was never defeated by Rome's military power. She was defeated by politics, by propaganda, and by the fear she inspired in the most powerful men of her time. Her brilliant linguistic skills, her incredibly sharp strategic mind, her savvy empire building, these remarkable achievements were systematically dismantled and erased in the historical record. The absolute truth of her capability was intentionally buried, all because her genius was simply too threatening to the men who ultimately survived to write the history books. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. We started this explainer by recognizing that for over 2,000 years, the world has viewed Cleopatra largely as a simple seductress, a captivating myth. So, I have to ask you, if Rome's formidable military couldn't initially defeat Cleopatra's sheer brilliance and wealth, did their propaganda ultimately win the war? Have we all been unknowingly believing Octavian's political spin for the last 2 millennia? It is an incredible testament to the enduring power of a carefully crafted narrative.
We are talking about a woman so undeniably brilliant and so deeply complex that over 2,000 years later, we're still unpacking her genius, we're still peeling back the layers of propaganda, and we absolutely cannot stop talking about her. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating, hidden history with me today. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the narratives, and always look beyond the myth.